The rain fell in sheets across the empty parking lot of Miller's Diner, each drop catching the neon light from the flickering sign that buzzed and sputtered against the darkness. It was the kind of night that made honest people lock their doors and pull their curtains tight, but Marcus Chun had never been one to hide from storms. He sat in his beat-up Honda Civic, engine idling, watching the digital clock on his dashboard tick past midnight as he waited for his late shift at the warehouse. To begin, before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. That's when he saw her, a young woman in military fatigues, sat hunched on the concrete steps of the closed diner, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside her chest. Rain soaked through her uniform, darkening the fabric until it clung to her small frame, like a second skin. But it wasn't her tears that made Marcus forget about his shift, his bills, his own exhaustion. It was the two small bundles she held pressed against her body, tiny faces barely visible beneath, the thin blankets she'd wrapped around them like shields against the world. Twins. Couldn't be more than 6 months old, maybe less, and they were. As wet and cold as their mother, their soft cries mixing with the sound of rain on asphalt in a symphony that broke something fundamental in Marcus's chest. He'd seen desperation before. Hell, he'd lived it for the past 3 years since Emma died, raising his 8-year-old daughter Sophia alone while working double shifts just to keep the lights on. But this was different. This was the kind of raw, helpless grief that came when someone had run out of roads to travel and doors to knock on. Marcus turned off the engine and stepped into the rain without bothering to grab his jacket from the backseat. The cold hit him like a slap, but he barely noticed as he crossed the empty lot toward the young soldier, who looked like she was drowning in more ways than one. "Hey," he called out softly when he was still a few feet away, not wanting to startle her. "You okay?" She looked up with eyes that held too much pain for someone who couldn't be older than 22, maybe 23. Her face was streaked with tears and rain, and when she tried to speak, only a broken sob came out. She pulled the babies closer to her chest, protective instincts kicking in even through her despair. "I'm Marcus," he said, crouching down so he wasn't towering over her. "I'm not going to hurt you or those little ones. But you're all soaked through, and it's getting colder. When's the last time you ate something?" The question seemed to crack something open inside her. She started, then stopped, her voice barely a whisper above the rain. "I don't know, yesterday. Maybe the day before." Marcus felt his heart clench. He looked at the babies in her arms, both of them so small they could have fit in his hands, their tiny faces red from crying and cold. One had a shock of dark hair that stuck up in wet spikes, while the other was nearly bald except for a light fuzz that caught the neon light. They were beautiful and fragile and completely dependent on a young woman who looked like she was barely holding herself together. "What's your name?" Marcus asked gently. "Jessica," she whispered. "Jessica Martinez. These are—" her voice broke again. "This is David and Daniel." "Beautiful names for beautiful boys," Marcus said, and he meant it. "Jessica, I need you to listen to me, okay? You and David and Daniel need to get somewhere warm and dry. You need food, and those babies need to be checked by someone who knows about babies. When's the last time they ate?" Jessica's face crumpled. "I ran out of formula yesterday morning. I've been trying to make what I had left stretch, but—" She looked down at her sons with an expression of such profound failure that Marcus had to blink back his own tears. "I don't know what I'm doing. I thought I could handle this, but I can't. I just can't." Marcus made a decision that would change all their lives, though he didn't know it yet. He stood up slowly and extended his hand to Jessica. "You're coming with me." She stared at his hand like it might disappear if she blinked. "What? You heard me. You and David and Daniel are coming home with me tonight. No arguments, no debate. You need help, and I've got a warm house, a full fridge, and a daughter who's going to absolutely lose her mind when she meets these two little guys." Jessica shook her head frantically. "No, I can't. You don't understand. I can't. Take Charity. I'm supposed to be strong. I'm a soldier. I'm supposed to handle things." Marcus knelt back down, this time close enough that he could see the exhaustion carved into every line of her young face. "Jessica, listen to me. Being strong doesn't mean suffering alone. Being strong means knowing when to accept help so you can keep fighting another day. And right now, those babies need their mama to be smart more than they need her to be proud." The truth of his words seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She looked down at David and Daniel, both of whom had gone quiet in that way that very young babies do when they're too tired and hungry to cry anymore. It was a silence that spoke louder than any scream. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she admitted in a voice so small Marcus had to lean in to hear her. "I tried the shelters, but they're full. I tried calling the emergency numbers, but there's a waiting list. I even went to the VA, but—" She trailed off, and Marcus could fill in the blanks. The system that was supposed to catch people when they fell was full of holes, and Jessica and her babies had slipped right through them. "Well, now you do have somewhere to go," Marcus said firmly. "Come on, let's get you three out of this rain." He helped Jessica to her feet, steadying her when she swayed slightly from exhaustion and hunger. She was taller than he'd initially thought, probably around 5'6", but she seemed smaller somehow, like grief and desperation had compressed her into something fragile and breakable. Marcus grabbed the diaper bag that was sitting beside her on the steps, noting how light it felt, probably empty or close to it. "My car's right over there," he said, pointing to the Honda. "It's not much, but it's warm and dry." As they walked across the parking lot, Jessica stumbled slightly, and Marcus caught her elbow to steady her. "When's the last time you slept?" he asked. "Really slept? Like more than an hour at a time?" Jessica considered this. Before they were born, maybe. 6 months ago, 7? Time kind of blurs together when you're taking care of twins alone, Marcus finished. "Yeah, I bet it does." They reached the car, and Marcus opened the passenger door for Jessica, then helped her get settled with the babies. David had started crying again, a weak, hungry sound that made Marcus's chest tight. Daniel remained quiet, but his little face was scrunched up in a way that suggested he wasn't far behind his brother. "There's a blanket in the back seat," Marcus said as he climbed into the driver's seat. "It's clean. Sophia uses it sometimes when she falls asleep on car rides." Jessica reached back for the blanket, and Marcus caught a glimpse of her hands in the rearview mirror. They were shaking, whether from cold or exhaustion or hunger, he couldn't tell. Probably all three. She wrapped the blanket around herself and the babies, creating a small cocoon of warmth in the passenger seat. "Sophia's your daughter?" she asked as Marcus pulled out of the parking lot. "Yeah, she's 8. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Lost her mom 3 years ago, so it's just been the two of us since then." Marcus glanced over at Jessica, who was looking out the window at the rain-soaked streets. "She's going to be so excited to meet David and Daniel. She's been asking for a baby brother or sister for years." Jessica turned to look at him, confusion clear on her face. "You're really taking us home? Just like that? You don't even know us. I could be, I don't know, dangerous or something." Marcus chuckled softly. "Jessica, you're a young mother with twin babies, sitting in the rain outside a closed diner at midnight because you have nowhere else to go. If you're dangerous, then I'm the tooth fairy." That earned him a small smile, the first he'd seen from her. It transformed her face completely, revealing the girl she probably was before whatever had brought her to that diner parking lot had worn her down to the bone. "Besides," Marcus continued, "I've got pretty good instincts about people. 3 years of single parenting will do that to you. You learn to read faces, to tell the difference between someone who's genuinely in trouble and someone who's looking to cause it. You, Jessica Martinez, are definitely the former. They drove through the quiet streets of Millbrook, a small city that had seen better days, but still maintained a sense of community that bigger places often lost. Marcus had lived here his whole life, first with his parents, then with Emma, and now with Sophia. It wasn't much to look at, especially at midnight in the rain, but it was home. "Can I ask you something?" Jessica said quietly as they turned onto Maple Street, where Marcus's house sat halfway down the block. "Shoot. Why are you helping us? I mean, really." Most people would have just driven past, maybe called the police or social services or something. But you stopped. You're taking us home. Why? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer. The truth was complicated, layered with his own grief and the way losing Emma had changed his perspective on what mattered in life. But Jessica deserved honesty, especially since she was trusting him with her children's safety. "About a year after Emma died, Sophia and I were at the grocery store," he began. "It was right before Christmas, and money was tight. I mean, really tight. I was standing in the checkout line, counting and recounting the cash in my wallet, trying to figure out if I had enough for everything in my cart. Sophia had asked for this specific cereal, the kind with the cartoon characters on the box, and it cost $2 more than the generic stuff. $2 that I wasn't sure I had." He paused as he pulled into his driveway, a narrow strip of cracked concrete that led to a small 2-story house with blue siding and white shutters. It wasn't fancy, but the porch light was on, casting a warm glow across the front steps. "Anyway," Marcus continued, turning off the engine, "I was about to put the cereal back when this woman behind me in line leaned forward and said, 'That's on me.' Just like that. She paid for our entire grocery bill, probably close to $100. And when I tried to thank her or get her name so I could pay her back, she just said, 'Pass it on when you can.' Then she left." Jessica shifted in her seat to face him more fully. "And you never saw her again?" "Never. But that night, watching Sophia eat her cartoon cereal and seeing how happy she was, I made myself a promise. The next time I saw someone who needed help, someone who was in the position we'd been in that day, I wouldn't hesitate. I'd step up." He gestured toward the house. "Tonight that someone is you and David and Daniel. So really, I'm just keeping a promise I made to a stranger." In a grocery store checkout line, Jessica was quiet for a long moment, looking down at her sleeping sons. "I used to be the one who helped people," she said finally. "In the army, I was a medic. My job was to patch people up, to make them whole again. And now—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Now you're the one who needs patching up," Marcus said gently. "That doesn't make you weak, Jessica. That makes you human." He got out of the car and came around to help Jessica and the babies. As they walked up the front steps, she stumbled again, this time more noticeably. Marcus caught her arm and realized she was trembling all over. "When's the last time you were somewhere warm?" he asked as he unlocked the front door. "I don't remember," Jessica admitted. "We've been sleeping in my car for the past week, but the heater doesn't work very well. Before that, we were at a friend's place, but—" She shook her head. It didn't work out. Marcus pushed open the front door and gestured for Jessica to go in first. The house was small but clean, with hardwood floors that creaked slightly. Underfoot and walls painted in warm earth tones that Emma had chosen years ago. Family photos lined the hallway, most of them featuring Sophia at various ages, her gap-toothed grin beaming from soccer fields and birthday parties and lazy Sunday mornings. "Welcome home," Marcus said softly, and something in his tone made Jessica look at him sharply. "This isn't our home," she said, but there was a question in her voice. "It is for tonight," Marcus replied. "And tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." The living room was cozy without being cluttered, with a sectional sofa that had seen better days but still managed to look inviting, and a coffee table covered in Sophia's homework and art projects. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, cold, now but clearly well used, with family photos arranged on the mantel above it. "Sit," Marcus instructed, guiding Jessica to the sofa. "Let me get you some dry clothes and something warm to drink. Are the babies hungry?" Jessica nodded, her exhaustion so complete that she seemed to be operating on autopilot. "They're always hungry lately. I've been rationing the formula, trying to make it last, but how much do you have left?" "Maybe enough for one more feeding. 2 if I water it down, but I know you're not supposed to do that." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Jessica, you can't water down baby formula. That can make them sick." "I know," she whispered, and the defeat in her voice was absolute. "I know I'm doing everything wrong. I didn't know what else to do." Marcus knelt in front of her, his voice gentle but firm. "Listen to me. You are not doing everything wrong. You are doing everything you can with what you have. And that's all anyone can ask for. But now you have help, okay? So no more rationing, no more watering down formula, no more sleeping in a cold car. We're going to figure this out together." Before Jessica could respond, a small voice came from the top of the stairs. "Dad? Is everything okay?" "I heard voices." Marcus looked up to see Sophia peering down at them from the landing, her dark hair messed up from sleep and her favorite purple pajamas wrinkled from tossing and turning. She rubbed her eyes with one hand while holding her stuffed elephant with the other. "Hey, sweetheart," Marcus said softly. "Come down here. I want you to meet some new friends." Sophia patted down the stairs in her bare feet, her curiosity clearly overcoming any lingering sleepiness. When she reached the living room and saw Jessica holding the babies, her eyes went wide. "Oh my gosh," she breathed, moving closer with the careful reverence that children often show around infants. "Are those real babies?" Jessica managed a tired smile. "Very real. This is David, and this is Daniel. They're 6 months old." "They're so tiny," Sophia whispered, reaching out one finger to gently touch Daniel's hand. The baby's fingers closed around hers instinctively, and Sophia's face lit up with pure joy. "Dad, look. He's holding my finger. I see that, sweetheart. Pretty amazing, right?" Marcus stood and put a hand on Sophia's shoulder. "This is Jessica, and she and the babies are going to stay with us for a while. They need our help." Sophia looked up at her father with the kind of serious expression that only 8-year-olds could manage. "Like when Mrs. Patterson's house flooded and she stayed." "In our guest room? Something like that," Marcus agreed. "Are you okay with that?" Sophia turned back to Jessica and the babies, studying them with the intense focus she usually reserved for particularly challenging math problems. "Are you sad?" she asked Jessica directly. The question was so simple and honest that it seemed to catch Jessica off guard. "Yes," she admitted. "I'm very sad." Sophia nodded solemnly. "I was really sad when my mom died. Dad helped me feel better. He's really good at helping people feel better. He makes the best pancakes in the world, and he tells funny stories. And he gives the best hugs." Jessica's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time since Marcus had found her, they seemed to be tears of relief rather than despair. "That sounds wonderful," she managed. "Do the babies like pancakes?" Sophia asked. "They're too little for pancakes," Jessica explained. "They only drink formula right now." "Oh." Sophia considered this. "Well, when they're big enough, Dad can make them pancakes too. He has this special recipe that makes them extra fluffy." Marcus felt his heart swell with pride for his daughter, who had inherited Emma's gift for making people feel welcomed and cared for. "Right now, though, I think everyone needs to eat something and get some rest. Sophia, can you help me gather some blankets and pillows for our guests? Can I help feed the babies?" Sophia asked eagerly. Jessica looked to Marcus, uncertainty clear on her face. "If that's okay with you," she said, "I could use the help." "It's more than okay," Marcus assured her. "Sophia's been wanting to help take care of a baby for years. Just tell her what to do, and she'd be your best assistant." As Sophia ran upstairs to gather bedding, Marcus turned back to Jessica. "Let me get you some dry clothes first. Then we'll deal with getting everyone fed. There's a 24-hour pharmacy about 10 minutes away. I can run out and get formula while you and Sophia get acquainted." "I can't ask you to do that," Jessica protested. "You've already done so much." "You're not asking, I'm offering." "There's a difference." Marcus headed toward the stairs, then paused. "Jessica, what size do you wear? I might have some of Emma's things that would fit you." The mention of his late wife seemed to surprise Jessica. "You don't have to. I mean, wouldn't that be weird for you?" Marcus considered this. The truth was, he'd been slowly going through Emma's things for the past year, donating what he could bear to part with and keeping the rest for when Sophia was older. Most of Emma's clothes still hung in their bedroom closet, and Marcus had long since stopped finding comfort in the faint scent of her perfume that still clung to some of the fabric. Maybe it was time for those clothes to serve a purpose again. "Emma would have liked you," he said simply. "She had a thing about helping people who needed it. I think she'd be happy to know her clothes were keeping someone warm." When Marcus came back downstairs 20 minutes later, he found a scene that made him stop in his tracks. Jessica was sitting on the sofa with David in her arms, while Sophia sat beside her holding Daniel with the careful concentration of someone who had been given an enormous responsibility. Both babies were quiet, and Jessica was talking softly to Sophia about how to support a baby's head. "You're a natural," Jessica was saying. "Have you held babies before?" "Not really," Sophia admitted. "But I practiced with my dolls. Dad said it was good practice for when I'm older and want to babysit." Marcus cleared his throat softly to announce his presence. "I found some clothes that should fit," he said, handing Jessica a stack of folded items. "There's a bathroom right down the hall when you're ready to change. And I'm going to run out to get formula and some other things you might need. Will you be okay here with Sophia for about 30 minutes? Jessica looked around the warm, safe living room, then at Sophia, who was humming softly to Daniel. "Yeah," she said, and for the first time since Marcus had found her, her voice held something other than despair. "We'll be okay." The pharmacy was bright and sterile, a stark contrast to the warm intimacy of his living room. Marcus grabbed 2 large containers of infant formula, a pack of bottles, some diapers in what he hoped was the right size, baby wipes, and a few other essentials he remembered from Sophia's infancy. At the last minute, he added a package of disposable cameras. Something told him that the next few days would be worth remembering. When he returned home, he found all 4 of his houseguests asleep on the living room floor. Jessica had changed into Emma's old sweatpants and oversized sweater, both of which fit her perfectly. She was lying on her side with David and Daniel nestled against her, while Sophia curled up nearby with her stuffed elephant. Someone had spread blankets over all of them, and the soft glow from the table lamp made the whole scene look like something from a Norman Rockwell painting. Marcus stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching them breathe. 6 hours ago, he'd been a single father worried about making it to his night shift on time. Now he was looking at what appeared to be his suddenly expanded family, and the strangest part was how right it felt. He set the pharmacy bags down quietly and retrieved his phone from his pocket. His supervisor at the warehouse wasn't going to be happy about the no-show, but Marcus found that he didn't care. Some things were more important than a perfect attendance record. As he typed out a text explaining that he had a family emergency and wouldn't be in for the rest of the week, Marcus realized that for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't thinking about Emma's absence. Instead, he was thinking about the presence of the people sleeping in his living room, and how sometimes the best things in life came disguised as the worst nights. He turned off the lamp and headed upstairs to his own bed. But sleep was a long time coming. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside his house, 4 people who had been strangers 12 hours ago were safe and warm and fed. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. And for Marcus Chen, who had spent the last 3 years learning, to be enough for his daughter. It felt like the beginning of something he hadn't dared to hope for, a chance to be more than enough for someone else. The first thing Jessica noticed when she woke up was the smell of coffee and something sweet that reminded her of Sunday mornings from her childhood, back when her grandmother would make French toast and the world felt safe. The second thing she noticed was that David and Daniel were no longer sleeping beside her, and panic shot through her system like electricity. She bolted upright, still tangled in the soft blanket someone had tucked around her, her heart hammering against her ribs. The living room was empty except for her, and morning sunlight streamed through windows that she didn't remember from the night before. For a terrifying moment, she couldn't remember where she was or how she'd gotten there. Then voices drifted from what sounded like a kitchen, and everything came flooding back. Marcus, the rain. His daughter Sophia with her gentle hands and kind questions. The promise of help when Jessica had run out of hope. She followed the voices down a short hallway, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. The kitchen was small but bright, with yellow walls that seemed to capture and multiply the morning light. Marcus stood at the stove, his back to her, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. Sophia sat at a round wooden table, and in her arms was Daniel, who was drinking from a bottle with the focused intensity that very hungry babies brought to feeding time. David was in a high chair that Jessica was certain hadn't been there the night before, also working on a bottle, his tiny hands wrapped around it like he was afraid someone might take it away. Both babies looked clean and content, and Jessica realized with a start that their clothes had been changed. Someone had taken care of her children while she slept, and the relief was so overwhelming that her knees went weak. "Good morning," Marcus said without turning around, as if he had eyes in the back of his head. "How'd you sleep?" Jessica started, then stopped. How long had it been since someone had asked her that question? How long since anyone had cared about her comfort? "I slept really well, actually. Better than I have in months. But the babies are perfect," Sophia announced from her spot at the table. Daniel woke up around 6, and then David woke up because Daniel was crying, so Dad and I fed them and changed them and played with them. David likes it when you make funny faces at him, and Daniel likes it when you sing. I sang him the song my mom used to sing to me when I was little. Marcus turned from the stove with a plate in his hands. "Scrambled eggs, turkey bacon, and toast," he said, setting it down at the place. Across from Sophia. "There's orange juice in the fridge, and coffee's fresh if you want some." Jessica stared at the plate like it was a mirage that might disappear if she blinked. "You made me breakfast." "I made us all breakfast," Marcus corrected gently. "Sophia's already eaten, and I grabbed a bite while I was cooking. The babies are on their second bottles of the morning, which tells me they were hungrier than they were letting on yesterday." The guilt hit Jessica like a physical blow. "I should have been up. I should have heard them crying. I'm their mother. I'm supposed to." "Supposed to what?" Marcus interrupted, his voice kind but firm. "Be superhuman?" "Jessica, you were exhausted. Your body shut down because it needed to recover. The babies are fine. They're fed and happy. And now you need to eat something so you can take care of yourself." Jessica sat down slowly, still staring at the plate of food. When was the last time someone had cooked for her? When was the last time she'd eaten eggs that weren't from a gas station or toast that wasn't stale? The first bite nearly made her cry, not because it was fancy, but because it was warm and real and made with care. "Dad makes really good eggs," Sophia said, adjusting her hold on Daniel. "He puts a little bit of cheese in them, and sometimes herbs from the garden out back. Mom taught him how to cook before she got sick." Marcus moved to the coffee maker and poured 2 mugs, adding cream to one and leaving the other black. "Cream or sugar?" he asked Jessica. "Both, please," she said, taking another bite of eggs. "This is really good, Marcus. Thank you." He set the coffee in front of her and took the seat at the head of the table, where he could see both babies and keep an eye on the kitchen. "So I was thinking," he said, wrapping his hands around his own mug. "Today we need to tackle a few practical things. First, we should probably get David and Daniel checked out by a doctor, just to make sure they're healthy and up to date on their shots. Then we need to figure out your situation with the military and see about getting you some benefits or assistance." Jessica's stomach clenched, and it wasn't from the food. "I'm not sure there are any benefits coming," she said quietly. "My discharge. It wasn't exactly under the best circumstances." Marcus and Sophia both looked at her, waiting for more explanation, but Jessica found herself unable to continue. How could she explain that her entire world had fallen apart? In the span of 3 months? That she'd gone from being Sergeant Jessica Martinez, respected medic with a bright future, to a homeless single mother with no prospects and no support system. "You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready," Marcus said after a moment. "But whatever happened, we'll figure it out. There are resources available, people who can help. You're not in this alone anymore." The kindness in his voice almost undid her. Jessica had spent so many months building walls around herself, trying to be strong enough to handle everything on her own, that having someone offer to share the burden felt foreign and overwhelming. "I want to help too," Sophia announced. "I'm really good at helping. I help Dad with the grocery shopping, and I help Mrs. Patterson next door when her arthritis is bad, and I help at school when the kindergarten kids need someone to tie their shoes." Despite everything, Jessica found herself smiling. "You sound like a very helpful person, Sophia. What else are you good at?" "Lots of things," Sophia said with the confidence that only 8-year-olds possessed. "I'm good at math and reading and making friendship bracelets and remembering where Dad puts things when he loses them. And I'm getting really good at taking care of babies. Daniel fell asleep in my arms while I was feeding him." Jessica looked down at Daniel, who had indeed dozed off mid-bottle, his tiny mouth still working occasionally as if he were dreaming about eating. "He looks so peaceful," she murmured. "Babies always look peaceful when they're not hungry or wet or scared," Marcus observed. "That's pretty much their whole world at this age. Basic needs met equals happiness." "I wish it was." "That's simple for everyone," Jessica said without thinking. Marcus studied her face carefully. "What would make you feel peaceful, Jessica? What basic needs aren't being met?" The question was so direct and compassionate that Jessica felt tears spring to her eyes. "I don't know," she admitted. "It's been so long since I felt safe or settled or like I had any kind of control over my life. I used to know who I was, what I was good at, where I belonged. Now I feel like I'm just floating." "That makes sense," Marcus said. "You've been through something traumatic, and you're trying to rebuild while taking care of 2 babies. That would be overwhelming for anyone." Jessica took a sip of her coffee, letting the warmth spread through her chest. "Can I ask you something? Last night, you said you lost your wife 3 years ago. How did you figure out how to keep going?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, absently reaching over to adjust David's bib. "Honestly, I'm still figuring it out. The first year was just about survival. Getting Sophia to school, making sure she ate, making sure the bills got paid. I didn't have time to think about anything else. And after that, I realized that Emma wouldn't want us to just survive. She'd want us to live, to be happy, to help other people when we could. So I started trying to do things that would make her proud, things that would make Sophia proud of me too." Sophia looked up from Daniel with serious eyes. "Mom would really like Jessica and the babies," she said with certainty. She always said that helping people was the most important thing you could do with your life. She sounds like she was a wonderful person, Jessica said softly. She was. Marcus agreed. And one thing she always told me was that when life knocks you down, you don't have to get back up alone. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone help you stand. Before Jessica could respond, David started fussing in his high chair, his face scrunching up in the way that meant he was building toward a full-scale meltdown. Jessica started to get up, but Marcus was already there, lifting the baby out of the chair and bouncing him gently. "What's wrong, little man?" Marcus murmured, checking David's diaper with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this before. I think someone needs a change." "Jessica, where did you put their diaper bag?" I think it's still by the front door. But Marcus, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," Marcus said, already heading toward the living room, with David in his arms. "I want to. Besides, Sophia needs practice with her babysitting skills, right, sweetheart?" "Right," Sophia agreed solemnly, though she looked a little nervous about being left alone with Daniel. "Just keep doing what you're doing," Jessica told her. "If he starts to fuss, try burping him. Sometimes they get gas bubbles that make them uncomfortable." Marcus returned a few minutes later with a much happier David, who immediately began babbling in the nonsensical way that 6-month-old babies do when they're content. "Crisis averted," Marcus announced. "Though I have to say, you guys are going to need more diapers soon. And probably some clothes that actually fit. These little guys have been swimming in what they're wearing." Jessica felt the familiar weight of inadequacy settle on her shoulders. "I know they need things. I've been trying to make do with what we have, but you've been doing everything you can with limited resources," Marcus finished. "That's not failure, Jessica. That's survival, but now we can do better than survival." "I don't have money for new clothes or diapers or anything else they need," Jessica said, the words coming out in a rush. "I've got maybe $40 to my name, and that needs to last until I figure out what comes next." Marcus sat back down at the table, settling David on his lap. "Okay, so let's figure out what comes next. First question, do you have any family you can reach out to?" Jessica shook her head. "My parents died in a car accident when I was 19. That's part of why I joined the army, actually. I needed somewhere to belong, and the military gave me that. My grandmother raised me after my parents died, but she passed away 2 years ago." "What about the baby's father?" Jessica's face went tight. "He's not in the picture, won't be in the picture. Ever." Marcus didn't push for details, for which Jessica was grateful. That particular wound was still too raw, too complicated to explain to someone she'd known for less than 24 hours. "Okay," Marcus said simply. "So we focus on building a support system from scratch. It's not impossible, just challenging. Do you have any friends from the military you could reach out to?" "Most of my unit is still deployed," Jessica said. "And the ones who aren't? Well, let's just say that my situation is complicated, and I'm not sure who I can trust." Marcus studied her face. "Jessica, I need to ask you something, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But are you running from something? Is there someone who might be looking for you?" The question hit closer to home than Jessica was comfortable with. "Not exactly," she said carefully. "I'm not in danger, if that's what you're asking. But there are people who think I should have made different choices. People who think I'm not fit to raise David and Daniel." "And what do you think?" Jessica looked down at her coffee, swirling the liquid around in the mug. "Honestly, some days I think they're right. I mean, look at where we ended up. Homeless, hungry, me crying in a parking lot because I didn't know what else to do." "But you never gave up," Sophia pointed out from across the table. "Even when things were really bad, you didn't give up on David and Daniel. That sounds like a good mom to me." The simple wisdom of an 8-year-old hit Jessica harder than any lecture or pep talk could have. Thank you, Sophia. That means a lot. Marcus reached across the table and gently touched Jessica's hand. Sophia's right. Good parents aren't the ones who never struggle. Good parents are the ones who keep fighting for their kids, even when everything feels impossible. Jessica felt tears threatening again, but these weren't the desperate tears of the night before. These were something else, something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope, maybe. Or at least the possibility of hope. So what do we do now? She asked. Now we make a plan, Marcus said. First, we get the babies checked out medically. I know a great pediatrician who might be able to see them today if I call in a favor. Then we go shopping for some basic necessities. After that, we start making phone calls. There are programs for veterans with children, assistance for single mothers, resources that you might not know about. But Marcus, I can't pay you back for any of this. At least not right away, Marcus smiled. Did I ask you to pay me back? No, but then don't worry about it. Money is just money, Jessica. It comes and goes. But chances to help people, chances to make a real difference in someone's life, those don't come along every day. Jessica stared at him, searching. His face for some sign that this was too good to be true, that there had to be a catch somewhere. But all she saw was genuine kindness and determination. Why? She asked softly, why are you doing all this for us? Marcus was quiet for a moment, absently stroking Daniel's hair as Sophia continued to hold him. When Emma was sick, he said. Finally, toward the end, she made me promise something. She said that if I ever had the chance to be someone's miracle, I shouldn't hesitate. She said that miracles aren't always big, dramatic things. Sometimes they're just someone showing up when you need them most. He looked directly at Jessica. Last night, you needed someone to show up. Today, you still need someone to show up. Tomorrow, you'll probably still need someone to show up. I can be that someone, at least for now. And what if, for now, turns into something longer? Jessica asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her since she'd woken up. Then we'll figure that out too, Marcus said simply. One day at a time. They spent the next hour making phone calls. Marcus contacted Dr. Sarah Kim, the pediatrician who had cared for Sophia since birth, and managed to get a same-day appointment for the twins. Jessica called the VA hospital and was transferred 3 times before finally reaching someone who could give her information about her benefit status. The news wasn't great, but it wasn't as bad as she'd feared either. So you're eligible for some assistance, Marcus said after Jessica hung up from her final call. It's not a lot, but it's something to build on. $600 a month, Jessica said, still staring at the notes she'd taken. That's not even enough to cover rent anywhere around here. No, but it's a start. And there are other programs, other resources. We just need to find them. Sophia had been listening to the conversation while playing peekaboo with David, who giggled every time she popped up from behind her hands. Dad, she said suddenly, why don't Jessica and the babies just stay here? We have the guest room, and the babies could sleep in there with Jessica, and I could help take care of them. Marcus and Jessica both turned to look at her, surprised by the suggestion. Sweetheart, Marcus said gently, that's very generous of you, but Jessica and the babies probably want their own place eventually. But why? Sophia asked with the straightforward logic of childhood. They don't have anywhere else to go right now, and we have extra space, and I really like having them here. The house feels, I don't know, more full, more like a family. Jessica felt her throat tighten. Sophia, that's incredibly sweet, but we can't just move in with you and your dad. We're strangers. No, you're not, Sophia said matter-of-factly. Strangers are people you don't know. I know that Daniel likes to be sung to, and David likes funny faces, and you make this little humming sound when you're worried about something. That makes you not strangers. Marcus met Jessica's eyes across the table, and she saw something there that made her pulse quicken. Not pity or obligation, but something warmer and more complex. What if, Marcus said slowly, we tried it for a week? Just to see how it works out. You could use that time to get your benefits sorted out, to look for more permanent solutions. And if it doesn't work for any of us, no hard feelings. Marcus, I couldn't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. There's a difference. Jessica looked around the warm kitchen, at Sophia holding Daniel like he was made of precious glass, at David babbling contentedly on Marcus's lap, at the evidence of a life that had somehow expanded to include her and her children without any strain or stress. 1 week? She said hesitantly. 1 week, Marcus confirmed. And if it works out, we'll talk about week 2. That afternoon, they went to Dr. Kim's office for the twins' checkup. Jessica had been nervous about taking them to a doctor, afraid that someone would find something wrong, that there would be evidence of her inadequacy as a mother written in their growth charts or developmental milestones. Instead, Dr. Kim pronounced both babies healthy and thriving. They're a little underweight, she told Jessica, but nothing that good nutrition won't fix. Their reflexes are excellent, their cognitive development is right on track, and they're clearly well bonded with you. You've done a good job taking care of them under difficult circumstances. The relief Jessica felt was so intense it made her dizzy. They're really okay? They're really okay, Dr. Kim confirmed. I'd like to see them again in 2 weeks just to check their weight gain, but honestly, these are 2 very healthy, happy babies. After the appointment, they went to the big box store on the edge of town. Marcus pushed a shopping cart while Sophia helped Jessica navigate the baby aisles, pointing out things they might need and offering opinions on everything from diaper brands to teething toys. These are the bottles Daniel likes best, Sophia announced, holding up a package. And David likes the ones with the slow-flow nipples because he's not as good at drinking fast. Jessica stared at her. How do you know that? I paid attention this morning when we were feeding them, Sophia said with a shrug. You have to pay attention to babies because they can't tell you what they want with words. They filled the cart with diapers, formula, baby clothes in the right sizes, bottles, blankets, a mobile for above their cribs, and a dozen other things that Jessica hadn't realized she desperately needed. At the checkout, Marcus handed over his credit card without hesitation, waving away Jessica's attempts to protest. We'll keep track of everything, he told her. If you want to pay me back eventually, fine. But right now, let's just focus on making sure these little guys have what they need. That evening, they set up the guest room as a nursery. Marcus brought down a crib from the attic, one that had been Sophia's when she was a baby. Sophia insisted on helping arrange the new clothes in the small dresser, folding each tiny shirt and pair of pants with the serious concentration of someone who had been given an important job. This used to be my room when I was really little, Sophia told Jessica as they worked. Before Mom got sick and Dad moved me upstairs so I could be closer to their room. I always liked this room because you can see the big oak tree outside the window. And sometimes squirrels come and sit on the branches. Jessica looked out the window at the tree in question, its leaves rustling in the evening breeze. It's a beautiful view, she said. Mom used to say that trees were good for watching when you needed to think about things, Sophia continued. She said they knew how to be patient and strong at the same time. Your mom sounds like she was very wise. She was. Dad says I'm a lot like her, but I think I'm like Dad too because I like to help people and I'm good at remembering things. They were interrupted by Marcus appearing in the doorway with David in his arms. Someone's getting cranky, he announced. I think it might be bedtime soon. Jessica looked at the clock on the knitstand and was surprised to see that it was already past 7. The day had passed in a blur of activity and planning, and for the first time in months, she hadn't spent every moment worrying about where they would sleep or what they would eat the next day. I should give them baths, she said, but even as she said it, She realized she wasn't sure how to manage bathing two babies at once in an unfamiliar bathroom. "I can help," Sophia offered immediately. "I'm really good at baths. I could hold one while you wash the other." "That's very sweet, but—" "She really is good at it," Marcus said. "She's been helping with bath time since she was 5. Very responsible, very careful." An hour later, both babies were clean, fed, and settling down for the night in their borrowed crib. Jessica sat in the rocking chair that Marcus had brought down from somewhere upstairs, watching them sleep and feeling something she hadn't experienced in so long. She'd almost forgotten what it was called. Peace. She felt peaceful. There was a soft knock on the door, and Marcus peered in. "How's everyone doing?" "Good," Jessica whispered. "Really good." They both went down easy, which almost never happens. Marcus stepped into the room, moving quietly so as not to wake. "The babies. Sophia wanted me to give you this," he said, holding out a small wrapped package. Jessica took it, surprised by the weight. "What is it?" "Open it and see." Inside the wrapping paper was a picture frame containing a photo that hadn't existed that morning. It showed Jessica sitting at the kitchen table holding Daniel while Sophia fed David, both of them smiling at something off camera. Marcus must have taken it while she wasn't paying attention. "Sophia thought you should have a picture of your first day here," Marcus explained. "She said every family should have pictures of the important days." Jessica stared at the photo, at the evidence of a moment when she'd been happy without even realizing it. "She called us a family. Is that okay?" Jessica looked up at Marcus, this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer. She hadn't even known she was praying. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think it is." They stood there in the quiet room, listening to the soft sounds of two babies breathing, and Jessica realized that for the first time in months, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. She didn't know what it would bring, but she knew she wouldn't face it alone. And that, she thought as she carefully placed the picture frame on the dresser, was more than enough for now. 3 weeks had passed since that rainy midnight encounter, and the Chun household had settled into a rhythm that felt both new and oddly natural. Jessica woke each morning to the sound of Marcus brewing coffee downstairs and Sophia's voice drifting through the thin walls as she chatted to the babies during their early feeding. The guest room had transformed from a simple spare space into something that looked lived in and loved, with baby clothes folded neatly in the dresser, and toys scattered across the carpet in a way that spoke of daily life rather than temporary arrangements. But this particular Tuesday morning brought with it a tension that had been building for days. Jessica sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the official envelope that had arrived in yesterday's mail. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs, and she knew without opening it that whatever was inside would change everything. The twins were still sleeping, their small bodies curled together, in the crib like they were trying to recreate the safety of the womb. David's thumb had found its way to his mouth during the night, and Daniel had somehow managed to kick off his socks again, a habit that amused Sophia to no end. They looked so peaceful, so innocent of the complications that seemed to follow their mother wherever she went. Jessica had been putting off opening the letter for 2 days now, telling herself she was waiting for the right moment, but the truth was simpler and more frightening. She was terrified of what it might say, terrified that her past mistakes would catch up with her just when she'd started to believe that maybe she could build something good for her sons. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Jessica?" Marcus's voice was gentle through the door. "Breakfast is ready when you are." And Dr. Kim's office called to confirm the twins' follow-up appointment this afternoon. "I'll be down in a minute." Jessica called back, her voice sounding steadier than she felt. She looked at the envelope one more time, then slipped it into the bottom drawer of the dresser beneath a stack of baby clothes. Whatever it contained could wait a little longer. Right now, she needed coffee and the comfort of Marcus's quiet presence, and Sophia's endless chatter about everything and nothing. Downstairs, the kitchen had become a hub of organized chaos. Sophia was sitting at the table with Daniel in her lap, making airplane noises as she tried to convince him to eat another spoonful of baby cereal. Marcus stood at the counter, simultaneously scrambling eggs and warming a bottle for David, who was fussing in his bouncy seat with the particular cry that meant he was hungry and not interested in waiting patiently. "Good morning, sunshine," Marcus said without turning around, though Jessica had no idea how he always seemed to know when she entered a room. "Coffee's fresh, and I made extra eggs in case you're hungry." Jessica poured herself a mug of coffee and added the cream and sugar that Marcus always kept stocked now, one of the dozen small ways he'd adjusted his household to accommodate her preferences without ever making a big deal about it. "Thanks. How long have the babies been up?" "About 20 minutes, Sophia answered, successfully getting Daniel to take another bite. Daniel woke up first and he was being really quiet. But then David woke up and he was not quiet at all. He was like, "Hey everyone, I'm awake and I want food right now." Despite her anxiety about the letter upstairs, Jessica found herself smiling. Sophia had developed an uncanny ability to interpret the baby's different personalities and needs, often knowing what they wanted before Jessica herself figured it out. Marcus handed her a plate of eggs and toast, then picked up David from his bouncy seat. "Someone's definitely ready for his bottle," he said, settling into his chair with the baby in one arm and the bottle in the other. David latched on immediately, his tiny hands reaching up to grab at Marcus's fingers. "I've been thinking," Marcus said as David ate, "maybe it's time we started looking into some more permanent solutions for you and the boys. Not because we want you to leave," he added quickly, seeing the flash of panic that crossed Jessica's face, "but because you need to have options, need to know what's available to you." Jessica took a bite of her eggs, buying herself time to think. The truth was, she'd been avoiding thinking too hard about the future because the present felt so precarious. Every day that passed in the safety and warmth of Marcus's home felt like borrowed time, and she was afraid that planning too far ahead would somehow jinx the fragile peace they'd all found. "What kind of permanent solutions?" she asked carefully. "Well, there are veteran housing programs, subsidized apartments for single mothers, job training programs that provide childcare while you're learning new skills. I've been doing some research online, making some phone calls." Sophia looked up from feeding Daniel. "Do you want to move out, Jessica? Because we really like having you here. The house feels better with you and the babies in it." The honesty in Sophia's voice made Jessica's chest tight. "It's not about wanting to move out, sweetheart. It's about, well, grown-ups have to think about things like independence and not overstaying their welcome." "But you haven't overstayed your welcome," Marcus said firmly. "And independence doesn't have to mean doing everything alone. Sometimes independence means building a support system that lets you thrive instead of just survive." Before Jessica could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it absently, then felt all the blood drain from her face. The message was from a number she didn't recognize, but the words made her stomach clench with familiar dread. "We know where you are. Time to come home, Jess. The boys need their real family." Jessica's hand started shaking so badly that she nearly dropped the phone. Marcus noticed immediately, his expression shifting from casual concern to sharp alertness. "What is it?" he asked, setting down David's bottle. Jessica stared at the message, her mind racing. She'd been so careful, so cautious about covering her tracks when she left Colorado. She'd used cash for everything, avoided using her credit cards, even traded in her old car for the beat-up sedan she'd been living in. How had they found her? "Jessica," Marcus said more urgently, "what's wrong?" She looked up to find both Marcus and Sophia watching her with worried expressions. Even the babies seemed to sense the tension, David fussing in Marcus's arms, while Daniel turned his head toward Jessica with wide, curious eyes. Jessica started, then stopped. How could she explain the complicated mess of her past to people who had shown her nothing but kindness? How could she tell them that her presence in their home might have put them all at risk? "Is someone threatening you?" Marcus asked, his voice low but intense. Jessica nodded, unable to speak past the fear that was closing her throat. Marcus handed David to Sophia, who took the baby automatically despite her confusion. "Sophia, can you take the boys into the living room for a few minutes? Turn on that cartoon they like." Sophia hesitated, clearly wanting to know what was happening, but she was a smart kid who understood when adults needed to talk privately. "Come on, Daniel," she said, shifting the baby to her hip. "Let's go see if there are any good cartoons on TV." When they were alone, Marcus moved his chair closer to Jessica's and spoke in the calm, steady voice of someone who was used to handling crises. "Tell me what's going on. Who sent that message?" Jessica took a shaky breath. "It's complicated." "I've got time for complicated." She looked into his eyes, searching for any sign that he was already regretting his decision to help her. But all she saw was concern and determination. "The baby's father," she said finally, "and his family, they don't think I should have custody of David and Daniel." "Why not? You're their mother." "Because—" Jessica felt tears starting to build behind her eyes. "Because I left him. Because I filed a restraining order against him. Because his family has money and lawyers, and they think they can prove I'm an unfit mother." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "What did he do to you?" he asked gently. Jessica wrapped her arms around herself. Suddenly cold despite the warm kitchen, it started small. Criticism about how I did things. Comments about my appearance, my career. Then it escalated. He'd get angry about things that didn't make sense, lose his temper over nothing. After the babies were born, it got worse. He said I was a terrible mother, that I was too damaged from my military service to take care of children properly. Was he physically abusive? Not at first, mostly just controlling, isolating. He convinced me to leave the army, said I needed to focus on being a wife and mother. Then when I was completely dependent on him financially, things changed. He started getting physical when I disagreed with him about anything." Marcus's jaw was tight, but his voice remained calm. "So you left." "I left. I took the babies and got out while he was at work one day. I thought I was smart about it, thought I'd covered my tracks. But his family has resources, connections. His father is some kind of big shot in local politics, and they have private investigators. And now they've found you." Jessica nodded miserably. "The text means they know where I am. It's just a matter of time before they show up here, and when they do." She looked toward the living room where she could hear Sophia talking to the babies. "I won't let them drag you and Sophia into this mess, Marcus. I'll pack up and leave. Today, I'll figure something else out." "Like hell you will," Marcus said, his voice suddenly fierce. "You're not going anywhere, and neither are those babies." Jessica stared at him. "You don't understand. These people have money, power. They'll make your life miserable just for helping me. They'll probably try to claim you're involved in some kind of kidnapping scheme or harboring a fugitive or something equally ridiculous but legally complicated." "Let them try," Marcus said. "I've got something they don't have." "What's that?" "The truth. And a friend who happens to be one of the best family law attorneys in the state." Before Jessica could protest, Marcus was already reaching for his phone. "Sarah Morrison. We went to high school together, and she's helped me with some legal stuff since Emma died. If anyone can protect you and the babies, it's her. Marcus, I can't afford a lawyer. I told you, I've got $40 to my name and some veterans benefits that barely cover basic living expenses. Did I ask you to pay for it?" Marcus said, echoing the conversation they'd had about groceries and baby supplies. "Sarah owes me a favor anyway. I helped her move 3 times in college and never charged her for pizza." Despite everything. Jessica found herself almost smiling. That's not how lawyer fees work. Maybe not, but it's how friendship works. And despite what your ex and his family might have told you, you deserve to have people fight for you. 20 minutes later, Sarah Morrison was sitting at their kitchen table, a cup of coffee in one hand and a legal pad in the other. She was a petite woman in her early 30s with sharp eyes and an air of competence that made Jessica feel slightly less like the world was ending. "Okay," Sarah said after Jessica had finished explaining the situation. "First things first. Do you have any documentation of the abuse? Police reports, medical records, photographs, witness statements?" Jessica shook her head. "I was too afraid to report it. He convinced me that no one would believe me, that his family's reputation would protect him no matter what I said." "What about the restraining order you mentioned?" "I filed it in Colorado before I left, but I'm not sure if it's still valid here. And honestly, I'm not sure how much good it would do anyway. His family has connections with law enforcement there." Sarah made notes on her pad. "We'll check on the status of the restraining order and see about getting it extended to cover this jurisdiction. Now tell me about your military service. What was your discharge status?" Jessica felt her stomach clench again. "That's complicated too." "How complicated?" "I was medically discharged after a PTSD diagnosis. But the circumstances around the discharge were—" Jessica paused, trying to find the right words. "There was an incident. A misunderstanding. Some people think I'm unstable, unfit for duty, potentially dangerous." Sarah's pen stopped moving. "What kind of incident?" "I was working as a medic in Afghanistan. We got called to a scene where an IED had gone off near a school. There were children hurt, badly hurt, and the officer in charge wanted to wait for additional backup before we moved in to help them. I disobeyed orders. I went in alone to try to save a little girl who was bleeding out. And I saved her. But I also put my unit at risk, and I had what the Army psychiatrist called a psychological break when I saw how badly she was injured. Started having flashbacks, panic attacks, insomnia. They decided I was too unstable to continue serving." Sarah was quiet for a moment, studying Jessica's face. "Do you still have symptoms?" "Sometimes. When I'm really stressed or tired, I get flashbacks. But I'm managing it, and I would never ever do anything to put David and Daniel at risk." "But your ex-husband's family could use your PTSD diagnosis against you in a custody battle." Jessica nodded miserably. "They've already started. Before I left Colorado, they had me served with papers claiming I was an unfit mother due to mental instability. They want full custody, with supervised visitation for me if I submit to regular psychological evaluation and anger management counseling." Marcus looked like he wanted to punch something. "That's ridiculous. You're one of the most patient, caring mothers I've ever seen." "It doesn't matter what's true," Sarah said pragmatically. "It matters what they can convince a judge is true." "But here's the thing, Jessica. Running away makes you look guilty. It makes it seem like maybe you do have something to hide. So what am I supposed to do? Go back to Colorado and fight a custody battle against people who have unlimited resources and political connections? Hand my babies over to a man who hurt me in a family that thinks I'm damaged goods? No," Sarah said firmly. "You're going to stay right here, and we're going to fight them from a position of strength instead of desperation." "How is staying here a position of strength?" Sarah gestured around the kitchen, where evidence of a stable, loving home was everywhere. "Because here you have witnesses to your good parenting. You have Marcus, who can testify that you're a responsible, loving mother. You have Sophia, who despite her age could provide character testimony. You have Dr. Kim, who can speak to the baby's health and development under your care." She flipped to a new page on her legal pad. "Most importantly, you have residency in a state where the family court system might be more sympathetic to your situation. Colorado might be there. Home turf, but Illinois doesn't care about your ex-father-in-law's political connections. You think we can win? I think we can fight, Sarah said. And sometimes fighting is more important than winning. Sometimes just refusing to give up is enough to make the other side realize they're not dealing with someone who's going to be easily intimidated. Marcus reached across the table and took Jessica's hand. You're not alone in this. Whatever happens, whatever they try to do, you've got people in your corner now. Jessica felt tears starting to flow, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of despair. I don't know how to thank you, either of you. Don't thank us yet, Sarah said with a smile. Wait until we've actually won something. But Jessica, those babies are lucky to have you as their mother. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Later that afternoon, after Sarah had left and the babies were napping, Jessica found herself sitting on the back porch steps with Marcus. The yard was small but well maintained, with a vegetable garden that Emma had planted years ago and Marcus had kept going in her memory. Sophia was at school, and the house was unusually quiet. I need to tell you something, Jessica said, pulling the VIA letter from her pocket. This came yesterday, and I've been too scared to open it. Marcus looked at the envelope. What do you think it says? Probably that they've denied my disability claim, or reduced my benefits, or found some reason to cut off my assistance entirely. My ex's family has connections everywhere, including people who work for the government. I wouldn't put it past them to try to sabotage any support I might be eligible for. Want me to open it? Jessica hesitated, then handed him the letter. I can't do it. I'm too scared. Marcus tore open the envelope carefully and scanned the contents. His expression was unreadable as he read, and Jessica felt her heart sinking. Well? She asked when she couldn't stand the suspense anymore. Marcus looked up with the expression of surprise. Your disability claim has been approved. Full benefits, backdated to your discharge date. They're issuing you a lump sum payment for the past 2 years, plus monthly payments going forward. Jessica stared at him. What? It says here that your PTSD diagnosis qualifies you for a 70% disability rating, which means significant monthly compensation. The letter also mentions that you're eligible for vocational rehabilitation, housing assistance, and medical care for both you and any dependents. That's impossible. They told me in Colorado that my claim was being reviewed, that it could take years to get approved, if it ever was. Marcus kept reading. There's a note here from a veterans advocate who reviewed your file. Apparently, your commanding officer in Afghanistan submitted a letter supporting your claim, detailing the circumstances of your medical discharge and recommending approval for PTSD-related benefits. Jessica felt like the world had tilted sideways. Lieutenant Rodriguez wrote, "A letter for me? Says here he described you as one of the bravest and most dedicated medics he'd ever served with, and that your actions in saving that child showed exceptional courage under fire, not mental instability. But the psychological evaluation said you had PTSD, which is a normal response to trauma, not a character flaw or a sign of unfitness for parenthood," Marcus said gently. "In fact, according to this letter, your condition is very manageable with proper support and treatment." Jessica put her head in her hands, overwhelmed by this sudden reversal of fortune. "I don't understand. Why now? Why did this come through? Just when everything else is falling apart." "Maybe because sometimes good things and bad things happen at the same time," Marcus suggested. "Maybe because the universe has a sense of timing that we don't always understand. Or maybe because you deserve some good news for once," Sophia's voice said from behind them. They turned to find her standing in the doorway, still wearing her school backpack and holding a folder full of homework. "How long have you been listening?" Marcus asked. "Long enough to know that someone's trying to take David and Daniel away from Jessica, and that you guys are going to fight them," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "Also long enough to know that Jessica got some good news in the mail. Which is about time because she's been looking worried for days. Jessica looked at this 8-year-old who seemed to understand complicated adult situations with startling clarity. "You're not scared about any of this?" Sophia considered the question seriously. "A little bit," she admitted. "But not really. Because Dad's really good at fixing problems, and now you have money to help fix them too, and Sarah Morrison is super smart, plus David and Daniel belong with you. Anyone can see that. How can you be so sure?" "Because they smile different when you hold them than when other people hold them. And because they sleep better when you're in the room. And because you know things about them that no one else knows, like how David likes it when you hum that song while you feed him, and how Daniel only stops crying when you rub his back in that special way." Sophia dropped her backpack and sat down on the steps between Marcus and Jessica. "Also because families aren't just about blood and money and stuff like that. Families are about people who take care of each other and love each other even when things are hard." Jessica felt fresh tears starting, but these were definitely not tears of despair. "You're pretty wise for an 8-year-old. "I get it from my mom," Sophia said simply. "She used to say that wisdom isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about knowing which questions are worth asking." "And what questions are worth asking?" "Right now?" Marcus asked his daughter. Sophia thought for a moment. "How do we keep our family together? How do we make sure David and Daniel get to grow up safe and happy? How do we show those mean people that love is stronger than money?" Marcus put his arm around Sophia and reached for Jessica's hand with his free one. "Those sound like exactly the right questions to me." As the afternoon sun slanted across the small backyard, Jessica realized that for the first time since she'd fled Colorado with 2 tiny babies and a heart full of fear, she wasn't thinking about running away. She was thinking about staying, about fighting, about building something worth protecting. The letter from the VA was still in her hand, proof that sometimes the system worked. Sometimes good people in positions of authority did the right thing. Sometimes hope was more than just wishful thinking. But more important than the money or the benefits was the knowledge that she wasn't facing the future alone. Whatever came next, whatever challenges or threats or legal battles awaited them, she had people in her corner now. People who believed in her, who saw her as more than her mistakes or her trauma or her fears. People who had looked at her and her babies and said, without hesitation, "You belong here." And maybe, Jessica thought as she watched Sophia chase a butterfly across the garden while Marcus planned their next legal strategy on his phone, maybe that was what family really meant. Not just blood or law or obligation, but choice. The choice to stand together when standing alone would be easier. The choice to fight for each other when fighting for yourself felt impossible. The choice to love without guarantee, to hope without promise, to believe that sometimes the best things in life came disguised as the worst nights. Inside the house, one of the babies started crying, and all 3 of them stood up automatically, a unit responding to the needs of the smallest members of their unexpected family. As they walked back inside together, Jessica realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready to fight. The knock came at 7 in the morning, sharp and authoritative in a way that made everyone in the house freeze. Jessica was in the kitchen, giving David his bottle while Marcus packed Sophia's lunch for school. The sound echoed through the quiet house like a gunshot, and Jessica's blood turned to ice water in her veins. "That's not a friendly neighbor knock," Marcus said quietly, setting down the sandwich he'd been making. Jessica's hands trembled as she held David closer. "They found us." Through the front window, she could see 2 black SUVs parked at the curb and at least 4 people in expensive suits standing on the porch. One of them was a woman with silver hair and a briefcase, flanked by 2 men who looked like they'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom. The 4th person made Jessica's stomach drop to her feet. Her ex-husband's brother, Richard Blackwood, stood slightly behind the others with his arms crossed and an expression of cold satisfaction on his face. He'd always been the enforcer in the family, the one who handled the unpleasant business of intimidating anyone who crossed the Blackwood name. Jessica? Marcus's voice seemed to come from very far away. Who is that? Before she could answer, the knock came again, more insistent this time. Sophia appeared at the top of the stairs in her school clothes, her face pale with worry. Dad? What's happening? Stay upstairs, sweetheart, Marcus called to her, and close your door. Jessica forced herself to breathe, to think, to function. Despite the panic that was making her vision tunnel at the edges, the woman with the briefcase is probably their lawyer. The man in the back is Richard Blackwood, my ex-husband's brother. The other two are probably private investigators or process servers. What do they want? To serve me with papers, probably. To try to intimidate me into surrendering the babies voluntarily. To make it clear that they have resources and I don't. Marcus moved to the window and peered out more carefully. There's a police car coming down the street too. Jessica felt the last of her composure cracking. They'd brought law enforcement, which meant they weren't just here to threaten and posture. They were here to take action. I need to call Sarah, she said, fumbling for her phone with shaking hands while still trying to hold David steady. Already? On it, Marcus said, his own phone pressed to his ear. Sarah? We need you here now. They're at the house. The knocking stopped, replaced by a voice that carried clearly through the door. Ms. Martinez, we know you're in there. We have legal documents that require your immediate attention. Please open the door. Jessica closed her eyes and tried to center herself the way her therapist had taught her years ago. Find 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. It was a grounding technique for managing PTSD episodes, but it worked for panic attacks too. She could see David's face looking up at her with curious baby eyes. She could see Marcus moving with calm efficiency as he spoke to Sarah. She could see morning sunlight streaming through the kitchen window. She could see Sophia's drawing of their family taped to the refrigerator. She could see the coffee mug Emma had painted for Marcus years ago sitting on the counter. She could touch David's soft hair, the smooth surface of his bottle, the worn fabric of the kitchen chair, the cool metal of her phone. She could hear Marcus's voice, David's contented baby sounds, and her own heartbeat gradually slowing. She could smell coffee and the lingering scent of Sophia's strawberry shampoo. She could taste the metallic edge of fear, but underneath it, something else. Something that might have been determination. Sarah's 5 minutes away, Marcus said, ending his call. She says don't open the door, don't speak to them, and don't sign anything no matter what they say. The voice outside continued, louder. Now and with an edge of impatience. Ms. Martinez, we're prepared to wait here all day if necessary. We have a court order requiring you to appear before a judge in Colorado within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in a warrant for your arrest. Jessica's determination wavered. Maybe I should just go with them. Maybe it would be better to face this head-on instead of dragging you and Sophia into it. No, Marcus said firmly. Absolutely not. We stick to the plan. What plan? The plan where we hope Sarah can work miracles and make powerful people. With unlimited resources, just give up and go away. Marcus crossed the room and put his hands on Jessica's shoulders, forcing her to look at him. The plan where we trust the legal system to work the way it's supposed to. The plan where we don't let bullies win just because they're loud and well-funded. Before Jessica could respond, Sophia's voice drifted down from upstairs. Dad, there's a news van pulling up outside. Marcus and Jessica both rushed to the front window. Sure enough, a white van with a local television station's logo was parking across the street, and a camera crew was getting out. They called the media, Jessica breathed. They're trying to make this into a public spectacle. Or maybe someone else called the media, Marcus said thoughtfully. Someone who wants to make sure this doesn't happen in the shadows. As if summoned by his words, Sarah Morrison's silver Honda pulled into the driveway, and she got out with the purposeful stride of someone who was very good at her job and knew it. She was followed by a second car, this one containing a tall man in a rumpled suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Who's that with Sarah?" Jessica asked. "I have no idea, but he's carrying a clipboard and a badge, which probably means he's some kind of official." Sarah walked directly to the front porch, ignoring the Blackwood entourage completely, and knocked on the door in the calm, measured way that lawyers used when they wanted to convey authority without aggression. "It's Sarah," she called. "I'm here with Detective Walsh from Child Protective Services. Can we come in?" Jessica felt her heart stop. "Child Protective Services? Marcus, they're going to take the babies." "No, they're not," Marcus said with a confidence Jessica wished she could share. "Sarah wouldn't have brought them here if it wasn't part of the solution." He opened the door, and Sarah stepped inside, followed by the rumpled man, who did indeed have a badge clipped to his belt. Detective Walsh looked around the kitchen with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen every possible living situation and was trained to assess them quickly. "Ms. Martinez," Sarah said without preamble, "this is Detective Walsh, the Blackwood family filed a complaint with Child Protective Services in Illinois, claiming that you've kidnapped your own children and are living in an unsafe environment. Detective Walsh is here to investigate that claim." Jessica felt the world spinning around her. "But the babies are mine. How can I kidnap my own children?" "You can't," Detective Walsh said in a voice that was surprisingly gentle. "But we have to investigate any formal complaint, especially when it involves the welfare of minors. I'm here to see the children, assess their living situation, and file a report with the court." "And what will that report say?" Marcus asked. Detective Walsh looked around the kitchen again, taking in the clean surfaces, the organized baby supplies, the evidence of a functioning household. "So far, that these children appear to be well cared for in a safe, stable environment." Through the window, Jessica could see Richard Blackwood pacing on the porch like a caged predator. The lawyer was on her phone, probably reporting to whoever was pulling the strings back in Colorado. "What happens now?" Jessica asked. "Now we let Detective Walsh do his job," Sarah said. "And we make sure the Blackwood representatives understand that this is Illinois, not Colorado, and their intimidation tactics aren't going to work here." Sarah opened the front door and stepped onto the porch, leaving Detective Walsh inside with Marcus and Jessica. Her voice carried clearly through the open door as she addressed the Blackwood contingent. "Good morning. I'm Sarah Morrison, Ms. Martinez's legal counsel. I understand you have some documents you'd like to serve." The silver-haired woman stepped forward. "I'm Janet Blackwood, representing the Blackwood family's interests in this matter. We have a court order requiring Ms. Martinez to return to Colorado immediately with the children for a custody hearing." "I see. And this court order was issued by which judge in which jurisdiction?" "Judge Patterson in Boulder County, Colorado." Sarah's laugh was sharp and professional. "Judge Patterson has no jurisdiction over residents of Illinois. Ms. Blackwood, Ms. Martinez has established residency here, which means any custody matters will be handled by Illinois Family Court. She fled the state with those children. She exercised her legal right to relocate with her minor children, especially given the restraining order she has against your son." Inside the house, Detective Walsh was examining the baby's room with methodical thoroughness. He checked the crib for safety hazards, looked at the supplies of formula and diapers, and even felt the temperature of the room to ensure it was appropriate for infants. "How long have you been living here, Ms. Martinez?" he asked as he made notes on his clipboard. "About 3 weeks. And your relationship to Mr. Chun?" Jessica hesitated, unsure how to explain their unconventional arrangement. He helped us when we had nowhere else to go. He's been letting us stay here while I get back on my feet." Detective Walsh nodded, making more notes. "And his daughter?" How does she interact with the babies? Sophia's been amazing, Jessica said, meaning every word. She's been like a big sister to them. She helps with feeding and playing, and she's incredibly gentle and responsible. I can see that, Detective Walsh said, gesturing to a corner of the room where Sophia had created a small play area with soft toys and books appropriate for infants. This shows long-term planning and care, not a temporary or unstable situation. Outside, the conversation on the porch was getting more heated. Richard Blackwood's voice had risen to a level that carried clearly through the neighborhood. This is ridiculous. Those children belong with their father's family, not with some stranger who's harboring a mentally unstable veteran. Sarah's response was ice-cold professional. Mr. Blackwood, I'd be very careful about making defamatory statements about my client, especially in front of media witnesses. Jessica looked out the window and realized that the news crew had set up their camera and was recording the entire confrontation. Whatever was happening on that porch was going to be on the evening news. Detective Walsh finished his inspection and returned to the kitchen. Ms. Martinez, I need to ask you some direct questions, and I need honest answers. Okay. You using any illegal substances? No. Are you receiving treatment for any mental health conditions? Jessica hesitated, then decided honesty was the only option. I have PTSD from my military service. I see a therapist monthly and take medication as prescribed. And how does that affect your ability to care for your children? It doesn't. I've never had an episode or a breakdown in front of the babies. I have coping strategies, and I have support now. Detective Walsh made more notes. Have you ever harmed or neglected these children in any way? Never. Have you ever been investigated by Child Protective Services before? No. Detective Walsh closed his notebook and looked directly at Jessica. Ms. Martinez, based on what I've observed here today, I see no evidence of neglect, abuse, or unsafe living conditions. Your children appear healthy, well cared for, and appropriately bonded with you. I'll be filing a report recommending that this complaint be dismissed. Jessica felt her knees go weak with relief. Thank you. However, Detective Walsh continued, you should be aware that the Blackwood family will likely continue to pursue legal action. This isn't over. We understand, Marcus said. And we're prepared for whatever comes next. Detective Walsh nodded and headed for the door. I'll need to speak with the other parties before I leave, but Ms. Martinez, you're free to continue caring for your children without interference from my department. After Detective Walsh left, Sarah came back inside looking pleased but tired. Well, that could have gone worse. What did they say? Jessica asked. A lot of bluster and threats mostly. They're going back to Colorado to regroup, but they'll be back. Probably with a different strategy next time. What kind of different strategy? Sarah sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out her phone. They mentioned something about a federal case, claiming you crossed state lines to avoid a custody order. That would make it a kidnapping charge. Jessica sank into a chair. So this isn't over, not even close. But Jessica, we won. A major victory today. Detective Walsh's report will carry significant weight with any judge who reviews this case. And the fact that they resorted to media intimidation suggests they're not as confident in their legal position as they want you to believe. Marcus poured Sarah a cup of coffee and set it in front of her. What's our next move? We file a motion with Illinois Family Court to establish jurisdiction here. We request a formal custody hearing where Jessica can present her case properly. And we prepare for the possibility that this turns into a protracted legal battle. How protracted? Jessica asked. Months, possibly. Maybe longer if they appeal. But Jessica, you have something now that you didn't have when this started. What's that? Sarah gestured around the kitchen, where evidence of the morning's crisis was scattered, but where the fundamental warmth and stability of the home remained unchanged. You have a support system. You have witnesses who can testify to your good character and parenting. You have resources to fight back. Most importantly, you have proof that you can provide a stable, loving home for your children. After Sarah left, the house felt strangely quiet. Sophia had gone to school with a promise that everything would be okay by the time she got home. The babies were napping, exhausted by the morning's disruption to their routine. Marcus and Jessica sat at the kitchen table, both of them emotionally drained. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Jessica said finally. "This felt too easy, like they gave up too quickly." "Maybe they realized they underestimated you," Marcus suggested. "Maybe they thought you'd fold under pressure, and when you didn't, they had to regroup. Or maybe they're planning something worse." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "Jessica, whatever they're planning, we'll face it together. You don't have to carry this alone anymore." "But what if fighting them hurts you and Sophia? What if they decide to go after your custody of her, or try to claim you're unfit because you're helping me? What if I've brought danger into your lives?" "Then we'll deal with that too," Marcus said simply. "But Jessica, you can't live your life making decisions based on what terrible people might do. You have to make decisions based on what's right. What's best for your children. What gives you the best chance at happiness. And you think staying here and fighting is what's best." Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the empty street where the news van and the black SUVs had been parked. "I think running away teaches your sons that love isn't worth fighting for. I think giving up teaches them that families can be bought and sold. I think surrendering teaches them that the people with the most money always win." He turned back to Jessica. "But staying here and fighting teaches them that families stick together. It teaches them that love is stronger than fear. It teaches them that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hard thing to do. And what if we lose? Then we lose fighting for something that matters." "But Jessica, I don't think we're going to lose. I think the Blackwood family made a mistake when they decided to take on a veteran who's found her fight again." That afternoon, while the babies napped and the house was quiet, Jessica found herself standing in the doorway of the guest room that had become her home. The room looked lived in now, personalized with her things and the baby's belongings. Photos sat on the dresser, including the one Sophia had given her of their first morning together. Baby clothes were folded in the drawers. Toys were scattered on the floor in the comfortable way that spoke of daily use and love. It looked like home. For the first time since she'd fled Colorado, Jessica wasn't thinking about the next place she'd have to run to. She wasn't calculating how much money she had for gas or whether the car would make it another 100 miles. She wasn't wondering where she and the babies would sleep that night. Instead, she was thinking about the future. About David and Daniel taking their first steps in this house, saying their first words in this kitchen, playing in the backyard while Sophia taught them games and Marcus fixed something that needed fixing. She was thinking about family dinners and birthday parties and Christmas mornings. She was thinking about a life that stayed in one place long enough to grow roots. The Blackwood family had resources and connections and lawyers, but they'd never had what Jessica had found in this house. They'd never understood that love wasn't something you could buy or intimidate or legally force into existence. They'd never learned that the strongest families weren't always the ones with the most money or the biggest houses or the most impressive pedigrees. Sometimes the strongest families were the ones built from scratch by people who needed each other and chose to stay together when staying would have been easier than fighting. As if summoned by her thoughts, one of the babies stirred in his crib. Jessica moved to check on them and found Daniel looking up at her with the bright, curious eyes. That reminded her every day why the fight was worth it. "We're going to be okay," she whispered to him, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "We're home now, and nobody's going to take us away from our family." Daniel gurgled happily and reached for her finger, holding it with the fierce grip that very young babies used when they wanted to make sure their favorite person wouldn't disappear. Jessica held his tiny hand and made him a promise that she intended to keep, no matter what the Blackwood family threw at them next. They were staying, they were fighting, and they were going to win. 6 months later, the courthouse steps were bathed in late afternoon sunlight as Jessica emerged with her legal team, her heart hammering but her shoulders straight. The final custody hearing had lasted 3 days, with testimony from character, witnesses, expert evaluations, and enough legal maneuvering to fill several filing cabinets. But it was over now, and the judge's decision was final. David and Daniel were legally, permanently, and irrevocably hers. Sarah Morrison walked beside her, carrying a briefcase full of documents that represented the end of the longest fight of Jessica's life. Behind them, Marcus and Sophia waited by the car, both of them trying to read Jessica's expression to determine whether the news was good or devastating. "It's over," Jessica called to them, her voice carrying across the courthouse plaza. "We won. It's really over." Sophia let out a whoop that echoed off the stone buildings and launched herself at Jessica with the enthusiasm of someone who had been holding her breath for months. Marcus followed more slowly, his relief evident in the way his shoulders sagged as the tension finally left his body. Judge Martinez ruled that the Colorado court had no jurisdiction over Illinois residents, Sarah explained as they gathered in a circle on the courthouse steps. She also found that the Blackwood family's allegations of unfitness were completely unsupported by evidence. Their entire case fell apart under scrutiny. What about their threats to appeal? Marcus asked. They can try, but their lawyer advised them during the lunch break that they'd be throwing good money after bad. Judge Martinez's ruling was thorough and well supported. An appeals court would be unlikely to overturn it. Jessica sank down onto the stone steps, suddenly feeling like her legs might not support her anymore. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of depositions, psychological evaluations, home visits, and legal motions. Through it all, Marcus and Sophia had stood by her side, offering everything from character testimony to childcare during court appearances. "I can't believe it's actually finished," she said, watching the late afternoon traffic move through the city streets. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me there's been a mistake." "No mistake," Sarah assured her. "Those boys are yours, Jessica. Legally, permanently, and completely. The Blackwood family has no claim on them whatsoever." Sophia plopped down on the step next to Jessica and leaned against her shoulder. "Does this mean you're definitely staying? Like, forever staying?" Jessica looked at this 8-year-old who had become as essential to her life as breathing, then at Marcus, who had turned his world upside down to help a stranger and somehow made it all look effortless. "If you'll have us, then yes. Forever staying." "Good," Sophia said with the satisfaction of someone who had never doubted the outcome. "Because Daniel's going to start walking soon, and I want to be there to see it. And David's been trying to say Sophia for weeks now, and I don't want to miss when he finally gets it right." Marcus sat down on Jessica's other side, creating a small circle of family on the courthouse steps. "So what happens now? Do we go home and pretend this never happened?" "Now we celebrate," Sarah said, checking her watch. "I made dinner reservations at that Italian place Sophia likes. My treat, and I won't take no for an answer." "What about the babies?" Jessica asked, suddenly remembering that David and Daniel were still at Mrs. Patterson's house next door, probably wondering where their family had gone. "Mrs. Patterson is expecting us to pick them up after 6, Marcus said. She insisted on making them dinner and giving them baths so we could focus on court today. I think she's more invested in this outcome than she's been letting on." As they walked to Marcus's car, Jessica felt something she hadn't experienced in over a year. Peace. Not the temporary peace that came from hiding or running, but the deep, lasting peace that came from knowing she was exactly where she belonged. The restaurant was crowded and noisy, filled with families celebrating various occasions and couples on date nights. Their table was near a window that looked out on the park where Jessica had taken the babies for walks during the long months of legal proceedings. She'd spent so many afternoons on those park benches, wondering if she was fighting a losing battle, if the stress was worth it, if she should have just given up and accepted whatever custody arrangement the Blackwood family demanded. "I want to make a toast," Sophia announced, raising her glass of lemonade with the seriousness of someone proposing a merger between corporations. "To our family, which is the best family even though we didn't start out as a family, but we became one. Anyway, to families that choose each other," Marcus added, raising his own glass. "To second chances," Sarah contributed, clinking her wine glass against their cups. "To home," Jessica said quietly, feeling the words settle in her chest like something warm and permanent. They ordered too much food and lingered over dessert, reluctant to end a day that felt like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. Sophia regaled them with detailed plans for the Halloween costume she wanted to make for David and Daniel, while Sarah shared horror stories from other custody cases that made their victory seem even sweeter by comparison. The Blackwood families. "Lawyer actually asked me during the break if my client would consider a financial settlement in exchange for supervised visitation rights," Sarah said, shaking her head. "I told him that love wasn't for sale, and neither were those babies." "What did he say to that?" Marcus asked. "He said he'd never had a case where the opposing party turned down a 7-figure settlement." "I told him he'd never had a case where the opposing party was fighting for her children instead of fighting for money." Jessica pushed her tiramisu around her plate, thinking about the man she'd once been married to and the family that had raised him to believe everything could be bought or intimidated into submission. "I almost feel sorry for them," she said finally. "They'll never understand what they were really trying to take away from David and Daniel." "What's that?" Sophia asked. "The chance to grow up in a family that chose to love them, instead of a family that felt obligated to own them." When they finally returned home, the house felt different somehow. Not physically changed, but emotionally transformed. This was no longer a temporary refuge or a safe harbor while Jessica figured out her next move. This was home, with all the permanence and promise that word implied. Mrs. Patterson met them at the door, with 2 sleepy babies and a report on their afternoon activities. Daniel took a 2-hour nap. David only slept for 45 minutes. But he was happy the whole time. They both ate all their dinner, and they've been asking for Mama every few minutes for the past hour. "Asking for Mama?" Jessica repeated, taking Daniel from the elderly woman's arms. "Well, not in words exactly, but they keep making this little sound that sounds like Mama and looking around like they're searching for someone specific." Jessica felt tears spring to her eyes as Daniel snuggled against her shoulder and made the exact sound Mrs. Patterson had described. Their first word, and it was for her. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to Marcus. "They know I'm their mama." "They've always known that," Marcus said softly. "Today just made it official." After Mrs. Patterson left and Sophia went upstairs to do homework, Jessica and Marcus found themselves alone in the living room with the babies for the first time since the morning's court session. The house was quiet except for the soft sounds of David and Daniel playing with their toys on the carpet between them. "I need to tell you something," Jessica said, watching Daniel attempt to stack colored rings on a plastic post while David chewed thoughtfully on a rubber elephant. "What's that?" "I've been thinking about what comes next. Now that the legal stuff is settled, I need to figure out my career, my independence, my contribution to this household." Marcus looked up from the baby toy he'd been fixing. "Jessica, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," she interrupted gently. "Not because you've made me feel unwelcome or dependent, but because I want to. I want to build something here, contribute. Something meaningful. What did you have in mind?" Jessica took a deep breath. "I want to go back to school. I want to finish my nursing degree, maybe specialize in pediatric care or trauma medicine. The VA benefits will cover tuition, and Dr. Kim said the hospital has a program for returning veterans. That's a wonderful idea, Marcus said, meaning every word. You'd be an amazing nurse. It would mean 2 years of classes, clinical rotations, studying at night after the babies are asleep. It would mean asking you and Sophia to help with childcare more than you already do. Marcus set down the toy and looked directly at her. Jessica, we're a family. That means we support each other's dreams, not just endure each other's presence. If you want to become a nurse, then we'll make it work. And after I graduate, when I have my own income and my own career, what happens to us then? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications and possibilities that neither of them had been brave enough to address during the months of legal uncertainty. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching David successfully stack 2 rings before knocking the whole tower over with a delighted squeal. What do you want to happen? I want this, Jessica said, gesturing around the living room where evidence of their blended life was scattered in every corner. I want family dinners and homework help and bedtime stories and arguments about whose turn it is to do the dishes. I want Sophia to teach my boys how to ride bikes and you to show them how to fix things and all of us to grow old together in this house. Even though we never planned any of this, even though we fell into each other's lives by accident, especially because of that, Jessica said. Because it means we chose each other for the right reasons. Not because we were lonely or desperate or afraid of being alone, but because we fit together in ways that none of us expected. Marcus moved across the room and sat beside her on the couch, careful not to disturb the babies playing at their feet. For what it's worth, I want the same things. I want Sophia to have brothers, and I want the boys to have a father who will never walk away from them. I want you to have someone who knows how strong you are and loves you because of it, not despite it. Is this the part where we talk about marriage and making it official? Jessica asked, feeling her cheeks warm. Only if you want it to be, Marcus said. But Jessica, I fell in love with you watching you fight for your children. I fell in love with your courage and your determination and the way you refused to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. I don't need a piece of paper to tell me we're family. But you wouldn't object to a piece of paper? Marcus smiled. I wouldn't object to a piece of paper. They were interrupted by Sophia calling from upstairs. Dad, Jessica. David's trying to eat Daniel's shoe again. They looked down to find that David had indeed managed to grab his brother's tiny sneaker and was examining it with the focused concentration that meant it was definitely heading for his mouth. Daniel, meanwhile, had discovered that he could make the rings on his toy jingle if he shook it hard enough and was creating a percussion symphony that echoed through the house. This is our life now, Marcus said, reaching down to rescue the shoe before David could complete his investigation. Chaos and noise and baby toys everywhere? Jessica asked, lifting Daniel onto her lap to redirect his musical ambitions. Love and laughter and people who need us, Marcus corrected. People who chose us and people we chose back. Later that evening, after the babies were asleep and Sophia had been tucked into bed with promises that yes, they could start planning the Halloween costumes tomorrow, Jessica stood in the kitchen washing the dinner dishes while Marcus dried them. It was a mundane domestic scene, the kind of ordinary moment that she'd never thought she'd have again. I called my commanding officer today, she said, handing Marcus a clean plate. Lieutenant Rodriguez. I wanted to thank him for the letter he wrote supporting my VA claim. What did he say? He said he was proud of me for fighting for my family. He said that taking care of the people you love is just another form of service. Jessica paused, considering her next words carefully. He also said he'd been following news coverage of the custody case, and that he'd never seen anyone fight harder for what mattered. You impressed a career military officer? Apparently. He said if I ever wanted to come back to the Army, he'd recommend me for officer training. Said I'd already proven I knew how to lead under pressure. Marcus stopped drying the plate in his hands. Is that something you'd want, to go back to military service? No, Jessica said without hesitation. I did my service and I'm proud of it. But my mission now is here, with you and Sophia and the boys. This is where I'm needed. They finished the dishes in comfortable silence, working together with the easy coordination of people who had shared this task countless times before. When the last pot was dried and put away, Marcus hung up the dish towel and turned to face Jessica. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small wrapped box. Jessica felt her heart skip. Marcus, it's not what you think, he said quickly. Well, it's partly what you think, but not exactly what you think. She unwrapped the box carefully and found inside a simple silver necklace with 2 small pendants. One was engraved with David's name and birth date, the other with Daniel's. It's beautiful, she whispered, touching the pendants gently. Sophia helped me pick it out. She said you needed something to wear that showed everyone you're their mama, officially and forever. Jessica felt tears starting again, but these were the good kind, the kind that came from being so overwhelmed with happiness that her heart couldn't contain it all. Will you put it on for me? Marcus fastened the necklace around her neck, his fingers gentle against her skin. There's something else, he said. Something I've been wanting to ask you for weeks, but I was waiting until the court case was settled. What? Instead of answering with words, Marcus dropped to one knee beside the kitchen table, pulling a second small box from his other pocket. This one contained exactly what Jessica had thought the first box might hold. Jessica Martinez, he said, looking up at her with eyes that held 6 months' worth of love and commitment hope. You've already made me a better father and a better man. You've made Sophia happier than she's been since her mother died. You've brought laughter and chaos and love into this house in ways I never imagined possible. Marcus, I'm not asking you to marry me because you need a husband, or because the boys need a father, or because we've fallen into some kind of convenient arrangement. I'm asking you to marry me because I love you, completely and permanently and without reservation. Because I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life and argue with you about the thermostat and grow old watching our children become amazing adults. Jessica knelt down beside him on the kitchen floor, taking his face in her hands. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. Yes to marriage and family and growing old together. Yes to the thermostat arguments and the chaos and everything that comes with loving each other this much. The ring was perfect, simple and classic, and exactly what she would have chosen for herself if she'd been brave enough to dream that big. As Marcus slipped it onto her finger, Jessica realized that this moment, this kitchen, this man, this family was everything she'd been searching for without knowing she was searching. They were still kneeling on the kitchen floor, kissing and laughing and planning their future, when Sophia appeared in the doorway in her pajamas. Did you guys get engaged? She asked with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who had been expecting this development for months. How did you know? Jessica asked. Because Dad's been carrying that ring around for weeks, and you both get this goofy look on your faces whenever someone mentions weddings on TV. Sophia patted across the kitchen and inserted herself between them for a group hug. So when's the wedding? And can David and Daniel be ring bearers? And can I help plan everything? Yes, and absolutely, Marcus said, pulling both his daughter and his fiancée closer. We're going to plan the most beautiful family wedding Illinois has ever seen. As they sat together on the kitchen floor, planning weddings and discussing ring-bearer logistics and debating whether October or spring would be a better time for outdoor ceremonies, Jessica realized that the scared young woman who had been crying in a diner parking lot 6 months ago was gone forever. In her place was someone stronger, someone who had learned that love wasn't just about finding the right person, but about becoming the right person for the people who needed you most. Someone who had discovered that family wasn't always about blood or law or obligation, but sometimes about choice and commitment and the daily decision to show up for each other no matter what. Someone who knew, beyond any doubt, that she was exactly where she belonged. Outside, snow began to fall gently against the kitchen windows, blanketing the neighborhood in quiet beauty. Inside, a family that had been built from heartbreak and hope planned their future together, surrounded by the evidence of a love that had started with a stranger's kindness and grown into something that would last forever. It was, Jessica thought as she listened to Sophia describe her vision for the perfect wedding dress, exactly the kind of ending that felt like a beginning. 2 years had transformed everything and nothing at all. The same kitchen table that had witnessed late-night feedings and custody battle planning now hosted homework sessions and wedding planning discussions. The guest room had evolved into a proper nursery, then into a toddler's bedroom with twin beds and toy boxes overflowing with trucks and building blocks. Jessica stood at the kitchen counter, her nursing school textbooks spread across the surface while she reviewed pediatric care protocols between stirring a pot of soup. The familiar chaos of dinner time surrounded her like a comfortable blanket. David was attempting to feed himself mashed sweet potatoes with variable success, most of it ending up on his high chair tray rather than in his mouth. Daniel sat in his own chair, methodically eating each piece of cut-up chicken before moving on to the next, his careful personality evident even at 18 months old. "Mama, David's making a mess again," Sophia called from her spot at the table where she was practicing multiplication tables while keeping one eye on her little brothers. "David's learning how to use a spoon," Jessica corrected gently. "Mess is part of the process." Marcus emerged from the basement where he'd been fixing the water heater, wiping his hands on a rag and surveying the domestic scene with the satisfaction of someone who had found his place in the world. "How are my favorite students doing?" he asked, kissing the top of Jessica's head before checking on the boys. "Your wife is about to ace her final pediatric nursing exam," Jessica said, not looking up from her textbook, but smiling at the ease with which the word wife now rolled off her tongue. They've been married for 8 months. A small ceremony in the backyard, with Dr. Kim officiating, and Mrs. Patterson crying happy tears from the front row. "And your sons are practicing their fine motor skills with root vegetables," Marcus added, wiping sweet potato from David's cheek. The evening routine had become a well-choreographed dance. Jessica closed her textbooks and helped with bath time while Marcus cleaned up the kitchen. Sophia read picture books to the twins while Jessica and Marcus tag-teamed getting everyone into pajamas. Story time happened in the living room. All 5 of them piled onto the couch with David on Jessica's lap and Daniel curled against Marcus's side while Sophia provided dramatic voices for all the characters. "Tomorrow's my last day of clinicals," Jessica announced as they tucked the boys into their beds. "Next week, I'll officially be a registered nurse." "Are you nervous about the job at Children's Hospital?" Marcus asked, adjusting Daniel's blanket. "Excited more than nervous. Dr. Kim says the pediatric trauma unit is exactly where someone with my background belongs." David reached up from his crib, making the grabbing motion that meant he wanted one more hug. Jessica leaned down to scoop him up briefly, marveling as she always did at how much he'd grown since that night in the diner parking lot. Both boys were healthy, happy toddlers now, walking and babbling and getting into the kind of mischief that made Jessica's heart sing with normalcy. "Mama," Daniel said clearly from his own crib, one of the dozen words he'd mastered along with Dada for Marcus and Fia for Sophia. "I'm right here, baby," Jessica assured him, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. Later, after the boys were asleep and Sophia had finished her homework, the 3 of them sat in the living room planning the weekend. Marcus was researching playground equipment for the backyard while Jessica graded practice exams she'd given to her study group. Sophia worked on a school project about family trees, carefully drawing branches and adding names with the concentration of someone who took genealogy very seriously. "I'm putting you and Dad on the same branch," Sophia announced to Jessica. "Because even though you got married after David and Daniel were born, you're still their parents together." Jessica looked over at the elaborate drawing Sophia had created, complete with decorative flowers and birds perched on various branches. "That's exactly right, sweetheart. And I'm putting Grandma Emma here," Sophia continued, adding a star next to a branch near the top of the tree. "Because even though she's not here anymore, she's still part of our family." Marcus glanced up from his laptop, his expression soft. "I think Mom would love being a star on your family tree." "She would love all of this," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "She would love Jessica and David and Daniel, and she would be really proud of how good Dad got at taking care of babies." The phone rang, interrupting their quiet evening, and Jessica glanced at the caller ID with mild curiosity. She didn't recognize the number, but something about it seemed familiar. "Hello?" She answered cautiously. "Is this Jessica Chun?" The voice was female, older, with a slight southern accent. "Yes, this is Jessica. My name is Margaret Rodriguez. I'm calling about my son, Lieutenant Carlos Rodriguez. He served with you in Afghanistan." Jessica's grip tightened on the phone. Lieutenant Rodriguez had been more than her commanding officer. He'd been a mentor and friend whose letter of recommendation had changed the course of her life. "Is he all right?" "Oh yes, dear, he's fine. He's actually here visiting for the holidays, and he told me the most wonderful story about a medic who saved a little girl's life and then went on to build a beautiful family. He said I should call you." Jessica felt tears prick her eyes. "He told you about that?" "He tells everyone about that. He says what you did that day, both in Afghanistan and here at home, is what real courage looks like. He wanted me to tell you that the little girl you saved is doing well. Her family sent him a picture last month. She's 8 years old now, healthy and happy." Jessica sank into the nearest chair, overwhelmed by the unexpected connection to a part of her past she'd tried so hard to forget. "She's really okay?" "More than okay. She's thriving. And Carlos wanted you to know that your decision to help her, even when it was difficult, even when people didn't understand, saved more than just her life. It saved her family's hope." After she hung up the phone, Jessica sat quietly for a moment, processing the conversation. Marcus moved to sit beside her on the couch, recognizing the expression on her face. "Good news?" he asked gently. "The little girl from Afghanistan. The one I—" Jessica paused, still learning to talk about that day without the crushing weight of guilt she'd carried for so long. "She's alive and healthy. She's 8 years old." "Same age as Sophia," Marcus observed. "Same age as Sophia," Jessica agreed. "Lieutenant Rodriguez's mother called to tell me." Sophia looked up from her family tree project. "Is she why you became a nurse? The little girl?" Jessica considered the question seriously. "I think she's part of why I became a lot of things. A mother who fights for her children. A person who doesn't give up when things get hard. Someone who understands that sometimes the right choice looks wrong to other people. Like when you left Colorado with David and Daniel? Exactly like that." Marcus reached for Jessica's hand, intertwining their fingers with the automatic gesture of two people who had learned to support each other through everything. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about how many people had to make the right choice at the right time for us to end up here," Jessica said, looking around the living room that had become the center of her universe. "You had to choose to help a stranger in a parking lot. Sarah had to choose to take our case. Dr. Kim had to choose to advocate for the boys. Lieutenant Rodriguez had to choose to write that letter. Don't forget Mrs. Patterson choosing to babysit during court hearings," Sophia added. "And me choosing to be the best big sister ever." Jessica laughed, the sound light and free in a way that still surprised her sometimes. Especially you choosing to be the best big sister ever. And now you get to choose to help other families. Marcus said, "When you start working at Children's Hospital, you'll be the person making the right choice at the right time for them." The thought of her new job filled Jessica with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since her military service. Pediatric trauma nursing would let her use everything she'd learned, both professionally and personally, to help children and families in crisis. She'd be the steady presence in the emergency room, the voice of calm in chaos, the person who understood that sometimes healing required more than medical knowledge. A soft cry from upstairs interrupted her thoughts. David, who was usually their best sleeper, was apparently having trouble settling down tonight. Jessica started to get up, but Marcus was already moving. "I've got it," he said. "You study for your exam." Jessica watched him disappear up the stairs and marveled, not for the first time, at how naturally they'd all fallen into their roles. Marcus wasn't David and Daniel's stepfather, he was simply their father. The man who got up for midnight feedings and kissed scraped knees and would undoubtedly teach them to drive and walk them down wedding aisles someday. Jessica? Sophia's voice brought her back to the present. "Can I ask you something?" "Always. Do you ever miss your old life? Before all of this?" Jessica thought about the question carefully. Her old life had included a successful military career, independence, the sense of knowing exactly who she was and where she belonged. But it had also included isolation, fear, and the kind of loneliness that came from not having anyone who truly knew her. "I miss some parts of being a soldier," she said honestly. "I miss the sense of mission, the feeling that what I was doing mattered, but I don't miss being alone. I don't miss not having a family to come home to." "And now you get to be a soldier and have a family," Sophia pointed out with 8-year-old logic. "You're going to fight for sick kids at the hospital, and then you get to come home to us." "You're right," Jessica said, realizing the truth of it as she spoke. "I get the best of both worlds now." Marcus returned from upstairs with David in his arms, the toddler apparently having decided that what he really needed was some late-night family time. David immediately reached for Jessica, babbling in the mixed language of almost 2-year-olds. That somehow conveyed exactly what he meant, even when the words weren't quite there yet. "Someone wanted to tell Mama goodnight one more time," Marcus explained, settling back onto the couch with David between them. "And someone wanted to make sure we were all still here," Jessica added, recognizing the behavior. Both boys occasionally needed reassurance that their family wasn't going anywhere, a leftover anxiety from their earliest months when home had been temporary and safety had been uncertain. "We're all here," she told David softly. "Mama's here, Daddy's here, Sophia's here. We're not going anywhere." David nodded seriously, as if filing this information away for future reference, then settled against Jessica's shoulder with the boneless relaxation of a child who felt completely secure. "I love our life," Sophia announced, putting the finishing touches on her family tree project. "I love that our house is loud and messy and full of people. Even when David gets crayon on your homework," Marcus teased. "Even then. Because it means we're a real family, not just people who happen to live in the same house." Jessica looked around the living room, taking in the evidence of their real family life. Toys scattered across the carpet, textbooks stacked on the coffee table, Sophia's art projects taped to the refrigerator, family photos covering every available surface. It was chaotic and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. "You know what I realized today?" she said, adjusting David so he could see everyone while still staying cuddled against her. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered, and all I had left was taking care of David and Daniel. And now?" Marcus prompted. "Now I understand that taking care of them led me to everything else. To you, to Sophia, to this house, to nursing school, to a future I couldn't have imagined when I was sitting in that parking lot. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things, Sophia said with the wisdom that continued to amaze the adults in her life. Sometimes they do, Jessica agreed. Sometimes getting lost is how you find your way home. David had fallen asleep in her arms, his small body warm and trusting against her chest. Daniel's soft breathing could be heard through the baby monitor. And Sophia was yawning over her completed family tree project. The day was winding down the way the best days did, with everyone safe and together and looking forward to tomorrow. I should put him back to bed, Jessica whispered, starting to stand. In a minute, Marcus said softly. Let's just sit here for a moment longer. So they did. The four of them clustered together on the couch while the house settled around. Them and the future spread out ahead of them like an unwritten story full of possibility. Jessica closed her eyes and listened to the sounds of her family breathing, feeling the weight of David in her arms and the warmth of Marcus beside her and the quiet presence of Sophia across the room. This was what happiness looked like, she realized, not a destination you arrived at, but a choice you made every day. The choice to love people even when it was complicated, to build something beautiful even when it was difficult, to believe in tomorrow even when today was uncertain. The choice to say yes when life offered you a second chance, even if that chance came disguised as the hardest night of your life. Outside, snow began to fall again, blanketing their neighborhood in the quiet beauty of winter. Inside, a family that had been built from strangers and hope and the simple decision to help each other settled in for another peaceful night together. And in the morning, there would be pancakes and coffee and the joyful chaos of getting everyone ready for another day. There would be nursing school graduation to prepare for and toddler, milestones to celebrate, and 1,000 small moments that would weave together into the story of their life. It was, Jessica thought as she finally carried David upstairs to his bed, exactly the kind of story she'd always hoped to be part of. A story about love winning, about families choosing each other, about the miraculous ordinary magic of coming home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.